We now know that Imo has 13 demon commanders, the Holy Knights who have sworn the highest tier of the Devil Pact in exchange for immortality and immense power. This was actually confirmed to us way back in chapter 1167, and seeing as these are some of the elite final villains and enemies of One Piece who can only be defeated through insane means like crazy advanced Conqueror's Haki and very unique sets of powers, I am confident that Luffy's going to have to take them down alongside his very own 13 commanders, all of whom we've already seen, I think, across his entire and very, very long journey. So, who are these guys? And who will fight who in this final battle? Well, I think I might have just figured it out, and those matchups could be absolutely insane. Especially the last one I want to talk about today. I think you're not gonna see it coming, because no matter how you cut it, I think that these big final matchups, good versus evil, will say a lot about the world and certain characters and bring many open plot circles and story arcs to a final satisfying close. Zoro versus Ethan Baron Venusjuro. And I want to start with this one because it's honestly just the cleanest matchup in the entire lineup, because it's pretty clear cut. Bad jokes aside though, I do think we all think that Zoro will fight Venusjuro because quite frankly, it'll just be the peak of swordsmanship. But on top of that, there are also some other specific nuances to Zoro's story that would be, quite honestly, perfectly fulfilled by this matchup that you might have either forgotten about because of all the Six Samurai hype, or just because the series at this point is long as hell. For example, Venusjuro literally represents the heavens as a swordsman who rules from up on the red line with the celestial dragons as the gods of the world. You know, the place that Zoro intends to make it clear he is the best swordsman too. Very early on in the story, he promised to make his name heard in the heavens and carry Kuina's will there so that she could see him fulfill their shared dream. And Venusjuro being a devil at the top of the world makes it a perfect chance for Zoro to fulfill his promise and his will. Not to mention he's of course the self-described king of hell and Luffy's ace in the hole swordsman, so of course he's just bound to face the heavenly swordsman Venusjuro, and as a Conqueror's Haki user, Zoro is one of the select few people in the world capable of actually somehow overriding the abyssal immortality. And yes, in fact, I do believe that pretty much every character on this list is going to either need advanced conquerors, has the potential for it, or some other crazy unique means of overriding the abyss powers for them to even have a chance to stand up to these top 13 ranked Holy Knights. And so I think that this clash particularly is a perfect setup once he learns to finally wield his Conqueror's will properly, which has already been teased quite heavily during the Elbaf arc. But also, I do think that before Zoro can clash with Mihawk at the end of the series, he also needs a third legendary blade, and Venusjuro at least seems to be wielding the legendary Shodai Kitetsu, the strongest of the 3 Kitetsu blades in that line. You know, the same sword line that Zoro's Sandai Kitetsu is from. He's had the Sandai Kitetsu for nearly his entire journey, but against the GOAT Mihawk, I do think Zoro might also use, you know, a bit of an upgrade. And this sword? This would probably do it, because it's one of the 12 supreme grade blades in the world and a perfect rival for Yoru when Zoro's inevitable final clash actually happens in the story. But I actually do think there's an even more obvious matchup that we've all been waiting for. Monkey D. Dragon versus Figureland Garling. Dragon's got some mad beef with this dude right here. Figureland, bad husband Garling, killed his own wife, lover? What actually was Shanks and Shamrock's mother to him? I don't know. And that one action alone set Dragon down his entire path of creating the revolution. I mean, to be honest, God Valley revealed a lot of stuff, but to me, maybe the biggest reveal was that it's Dragon's destiny to slay this one dude specifically. It's like the most clear-cut example of reaping what you sow, right? Like Garling's vile deeds created the great revolutionary Monkey D. Dragon, who, you know, I changed my mind on completely during this arc. MVP of the arc, and I do think that deep down, Dragon wants to make real amends for failing Shanks and Shamrock at God Valley by not being able to protect both of them perfectly as he wanted to. Honestly, this duel feels like something that has been quietly building up in the background for literal decades, because that's exactly what's been happening. I do want Dragon to fight alongside Luffy, of course. I've wanted this ever since I repped chapter 100. I also believe that Dragon might just be the second most important person in One Piece because he clearly has some special stuff going on that Oda isn't showing us yet. But also, like, come on. Of course, this has to happen. Monkey D. Dragon, the big guy versus Celestial Dragons, is like baked into the very fibers of the story. And Garling, as one of the Gorosei now, represents pretty much everything that Dragon despises with all his being. He's the Celestial Dragon at the top of the world, the judge, the jury, the executioner, maybe only barely below Emu, though honestly with Garling, I'm not even sure if he might have his own plans of gaining control of the world. He believes that no one is above him or the Celestial Dragons, a beacon of supremacy, arrogance, and just very bitter and foul deeds. Now Dragon, Luffy's dad, our protagonist, stands as the direct rejection of that very belief. He's of course not chaotic in the same way that Luffy is, but he's far more intentional and calculated. Every move that he's been making is aimed at dismantling the very structure that Garling represents and exists to uphold. Of course, I'm also like 99.9999999% certain that Dragon has to have pretty good Conqueror's Haki, as we do sort of almost know it's a genetic thing. At least it's kind of been implied to be by Ivankov during Marineford, who also pretty much outright stated that Dragon had it, because when Luffy unleashed his Conqueror's will there, Ivankov stated that makes sense because, you know, he's Dragon's son, which sounds like Dragon has some pretty insane Conqueror's Haki himself. Speaking of which, actually, Luffy's brother, who's like a son to Dragon, is who I actually want to talk about next, just because it kind of makes sense. They're coming as a duo. Sabo versus Gunko. Now, Sabo's role in the story has evolved into something really oddly specific, I feel. He isn't just Luffy's brother anymore, he's now the face of the Revolutionary Army's ideals. He carries Dragon's will into the world, but he does it in a way that's much more visible, more emotional, I guess, and more connected to the people that they're actually trying to save, because let's be real, Dragon's a little bit of a stoic guy, to put it mildly. Sabo, though, he's the Flame Emperor, the guiding light of the revolution, and he's also nobility who threw it all away to fight for what's actually right in the world, which makes him a perfect person to fight Princess Shuri, aka Gunko, aka whatever she is to Brook, another royal who's essentially the anti-Sabo. After all, Gunko is a slave to Emu, Emu's chosen vessel and handmaiden, and this is basically the battle of the right hands, right? The second in command of the Revolutionary Army and the right hand of Emu, the world itself, the person who built this entire system. And very much like Dragon's matchup, I do think that this actually might technically be a very salty runback, because when Sabo raided the Holy Land, I believe that it was actually Gunko who shot Sabo and Cobra with their shadow arrow in the throne room, because, you know, we now know Gunko has the arrow fruit, matching the power that actually killed Cobra. So I feel it's about time for Sabo to get his big revenge for the murder of King Cobra and the attack on his life. Now, how will Sabo override the Abyss since he's not a confirmed conqueror? Well, there are pretty much two ways. One, he might be or he might become one for the sake of the story, but I also do think that his Flame fruit could have some very odd and useful properties to it, especially since the Sun God is like the big thing in the story overall. So will Luffy maybe buff it up? I don't know, that could be pretty cool. Or maybe Sabo will just break the curse that Gunko is bound by, not actually overriding the Abyss himself, but in the spirit of the revolution, freeing Gunko finally from the shackles tying her to Imu. And honestly, I just wouldn't put it past Sabo to just want to fight Gunko on behalf of Brook and the Straw Hats. He's kind of spent a lot of time with them. He knows what they mean to Luffy, and if he finds out that Brook's got some very deep and sad history with Gunko, then I think that this could also explain how Sabo wins this battle, because maybe Brook himself might even tag team with Sabo for this fight specifically, or maybe Brook just gives Sabo what he needs to know in order to break through, whatever Imu's mind, memory wipe control thing is, and just regain her memories that way. So yeah, I kind of think that Sabo is the perfect person to step in and free her from the shackles that bind her. And since we're talking about shackles that bind some super powerful baddies, let's keep that track going with the next matchup too. Boa Hancock versus Saint Sommers. The all-out love battle is here. Now, I'm sure a bunch of you expected me to throw Sanji against Sommers, and I definitely get why you'd say that. It kind of makes sense. I also think it's still a possibility, but I don't know. I think this one feels a lot better. Let me explain what I mean. So, Boa Hancock, of course, represents love, affection, desire, and lust. She's in love with Luffy, and you just know that if he called on her and her conqueror's will, she'd come running right away. She'd probably come running even if he didn't ask her. Now, in case you missed it, since we've never really seen it on screen actually, Boa actually is canonically confirmed to have Conqueror's Haki, and I think now is the time in the story to finally show this. And who better for her to fight than the man who tried to kill Shaki, a former pirate empress of Amazon Lily, a man with a messed up, tainted, and twisted perception of love. Rayleigh and Shaki are basically heroes to Boa, and she would now have finally the chance to slay the man who caused the people that she loves so much strife during the God Valley incident, and I think that'd be a pretty cute way to put a bow, or I guess a boa, on it. No? Okay. Well, of course, there's another thing that could make this battle have a very insanely deep emotional core too, because both of these characters, Sommers and Boa, are tied to the same origin point, but have of course taken completely different paths from there. Hancock's entire identity and history is completely shaped by her past as a slave to the Celestial Dragons. Her strength, her pride, even the way that she presents herself, it's all built as a response to that personal trauma of her childhood. And yet, despite everything, she still embodies the normal concept of love. Not in a weak or submissive way, quite the opposite actually. It's like super dominant most of the time, but in a way that's fiercely protective and deeply human. And maybe, just maybe, that's because she was forced to be Summer's slave? Hear me out for a second. This dude is very weird and freaky and an absolute creep. I do think that Oda could give Boa a very crazy and massive character moment by having her confront the very man who ruined big parts of her life and her childhood. And for that man to be Sommers, after we saw him totally freak out during the slave escape during the Herald flashback, I think it's likely he was losing it because he lost his slaves, his most treasured one. God, it kind of makes whatever roundhouse kick to the balls she does feel as vindicating as possible, hopefully. But Boa, of course, isn't the only conqueror from Luffy's past who I think will rally to his side during the final war. In fact, I think the next one is the character that I want to see make an appearance the most. And the dude that I think he will fight might actually blow your mind if you've never actually thought about this possibility before, because it's gonna be Katakuri versus Rob Lucci. That's right, baby. Not only do I think that Katakuri's coming in hot and spicy to use his insane future sight and Conqueror's Haki to save the day again, but I also think that we will soon be introduced to Robert Lucci, Knight of God, who I probably need to explain first here, because I do think you guys can all agree that Katakuri will come in clutch during the final saga at some point, hopefully, right? He's popular, he appeared in the film Red to fill a very similar role, and he and Luffy are sort of almost homies after Whole Cake Island. So why do I think that Rob Lucci, out of all people, would ever become a top 13 Holy Knight? Well, that's because there's at least one guaranteed open spot amongst the 13 Covenant wielders after Egghead Island. Saturn was killed, and Garling already had a Holy Knight pact as the former leader of the Holy Knight, so that means at the very least, there should be one opening. And Rob Lucci, as a member of CP0, who also directly talked to a Gorosei member and has proven to be useful and loyal, would be a pretty fitting upgrade. Also, the dude has major beef with both Luffy and Zoro now after his humiliation and that defeat during Egghead Island, right? Actually, at this point in the story, getting absolutely stomped seems to be a prerequisite for Lucci's promotions, kind of buggy style, so I do feel even more confident in this somehow. He's also super strong, an awakened zone with plenty of powerful techniques, who is a living weapon for the world government already and has been his entire life. He's the perfect Holy Knight already. Now he just needs the proper promotion, which I do think will actually happen. And if there's one person I want to see him fight for several reasons, it's gotta be Katakuri, dude. No? Okay, let me explain this one too. This matchup works so crazy well because on paper, they are actually incredibly similar characters. Think about it. Both of these guys are elite fighters who use incredibly precise, controlled, and terrifyingly powerful and incredibly efficient attacks during their battles. But more importantly is that both at one point stood as direct obstacles in Luffy's path, some of his toughest nuts to crack. Is that a thing that I can say? Well, it happened. They are former enemies of Luffy who were impacted by him totally differently, right? And I'd love to see those two ideals clash at the end of the story. Luffy fulfilled his big promise to Katakuri. Big Mom was defeated and stopped in her hunger lust, right? And Katakuri now owes his family's life and safety to Luffy and his Wano Alliance because they took Big Mom out of the question. And of course, we saw a bunch of glimpses of Katakuri's probable respect and admiration of Luffy at the end of their unique battle. He has completely changed as Luffy, learned and became stronger during their battle too. Katakuri changed thanks to Luffy. Lucci, on the other hand, was the guy who just completely doubled down on his hatred of Luffy after their fight. Where Katakuri evolved, Lucci became just more entrenched in the system he was already in. His hatred and his loyalty to the government are still unwavering. He doesn't question orders, he doesn't hesitate, but he does willingly throw everything away just to get another chance to fight Luffy. And seeing as Katakuri is a pretty stand-up guy, I do think he'd absolutely square up with Rob Lucci and use every ounce of his conqueror's will to just decimate the stupid cheetah once and for all. I mean, Rob Lucci, you don't deserve Luffy or his first mate or even a Straw Hat when that time comes, but surely there will be at least one or two more Straw Hats in this big clash, right? It won't be all random characters, right? Well, yeah, and I do think we'll finally see someone become a Straw Hat and also serve as one of Luffy's top tier 13 commanders. Yamato versus top man Warcury. Okay, come on. You knew that Yamato was in this video. She's one of my favorite One Piece characters, and Yamato has to be coming back to kick some real celestial dragon rump. I mean, we all do, right? I don't know, maybe it's just me, but once I read that the color of kings was required to override the Holy Knight's immortality shenanigans, Yamato returning and reuniting with the crew, I really hope feels guaranteed. There are just so many characters who have this type of hockey, and if they're a good guy, I kind of think they need to show up and ball against the Holy Knights too. And after half of Elbaf had a Yamato cover story that never really properly paid off, I do think the whole point here was to really set up for her return to the story to destroy the Gorosei pigs once and for all. So make some bacon, Yamato, please, right? Yamato's entire identity is really built around inheritance. Not in the traditional sense, but in the way that One Piece treats inherited will as something that you choose to carry on and carry forward into the future. She didn't have to become Odin, of course. She chose to. She saw what he represented, freedom, adventure, and sticking it to the man, and she said, I'm gonna be him. And we all know that Odin would have sliced and diced his way pleasurably through the Gorosei lines if he ever had the chance to, but he didn't, so Yamato will and give us some good old Wano representation in that final battle. And the reason I think that Warcury is the perfect person for Yamato to clash against is actually rooted in a very specific part of Odin's backstory. Let's see if you remember this one. A defining moment of Odin's journey in his backstory was in chapter 961 when we saw him cut down the mountain god, a giant boar the size of a hill who was threatening the flower capital. A giant boar? I don't know, I just feel it deep in my loins. If Yamato sees a giant boar devil god fighting for Imu, they're gonna wanna cut it down to save the world because that's what Odin did. Duh, it's just, I don't know, the perfect bit for me for Oda to write, and I do think it's the exact thing that he would also do, so I'm just kind of expecting it at this point. But whereas this matchup is a full circle moment for Yamato, of course, I think there's another ally of Luffy who was robbed of his own full circle moment, and it could actually happen properly during this final war and might just be one of the craziest fights that I could ever hope to see happen in the story. Trafalgar Law versus Don Quixote Doflamingo. Trafalgar D. Water Law deserved to beat Doflamingo. I mean, Luffy doing it was great and honorable and won over Law, but Law really deserved to win that fight, I think. And I think he still is gonna get another chance because now he's way more powerful, has mastered the very broken powers of Room, and well, quite frankly, I'm fairly confident that Doflamingo is just probably gonna come back into the story one way or another, and I'm a little bit torn whether Dofi will be a member of Cross Guild or a Holy Knight, but I do think that Imu's sick and twisted desire to manipulate anyone and everyone would kind of make Dofi, out of everyone, the perfect pawn. You see, I'm pretty sure that Doflamingo thinks that Imo wants them dead, but I kind of think that they have a fate worse than death on the horizon because if Imo needs powerful new Holy Knights, Doflamingo would hands down honestly be like A5 Wagyu beef. Well marbled in fat, meat, and desire to slaughter all as they become the heavenly demon once again. I mean, come on, let's be real. Bringing back Doflamingo as a Holy Knight kind of elevates his already evil nature in a really interesting way. It takes a villain who already kind of believed himself to be above the world and forces him to work for the world. And seeing as Dofi already knows about Imo, or at very least, seems to, because Imo's introduction was kinda given to us by Doflamingo, I think there's already a precedent for his return as Saint Don Quixote Doflamingo, re-established Celestial Dragon and Holy Knight. And that then gives Law a second chance not to just fight him, but to truly finish what started all the way back during his childhood. Now, can he defeat him without Conqueror's Haki? I mean, maybe. I think Law is like the perfect character to have some crazy BS way to override the immortality in some other crazy fashion with his very broken devil fruit. Now, who knows, maybe he can actually use his immortality surgery to reverse the abyssal immortality or something, and that's how everything comes full circle for him. How poetic would it be for Law's immortality surgery? What Dofi wanted to do to him actually being the thing that takes him out? Or maybe he'll just awaken Conqueror's Haki and that'll be that. Much like how I think that the next commander of Luffy's will awaken his own kingly spirit in order to save the world from Imu's wrath as well, Momonosuke versus Jupiter. Alright, so at the end of Wano, next to the Yamato not joining the crew thing, I also felt like Oda was teasing Momo's rapid growth was gonna have a much bigger payoff, and I do think that this is how that will actually happen. I mean, let's face it, Momo can learn to use a sword, but his true power is going to connect to the Momo that we first met, Dragon Momo. And seeing as he has power that can potentially rival that of Kaido's and might be destined to use Conqueror's Haki due to the weird lineage aspect I talked about earlier with his dad being Odin and all, I think Momo showing up to stand on business is kind of inevitable either way, honestly, if this is how it happens or not. And quite frankly, I picked this matchup specifically because it's visually truly gonna be a sight to see. Giant serpent dragon against giant worm is such a perfect pairing. I just want to see Oda draw the fight here because it's set up to be paneled super dynamically. Maybe we can even get a hybrid Momo design. Please, Oda? Please? That'd be kind of sick. Also, there's just some good old irony in Jupiter being the god of agriculture and Wano's residents starving for so long because their land was ruined. And honestly, the fact that Momo isn't confirmed to have Conqueror's Haki yet actually kind of strengthens the reason that he should be part of this fight. I mean, he might just awaken it so that he can prevent the entire world from suffering the exact same fate that his homeland already did. We do know he's going to have to mobilize alongside Zunisha in the final saga anyhow to free Pluton, so why not put all of that to use slaying Shai-Halut, the Great Sandworm? But to be honest, Momo isn't going to be the only matchup I picked here due to the design, power matchup, and insane paneling potential though, because there's another kaiju battle here. Loki versus Marcus Mars. Yeah! I do just want to see giant Nidhogg face off in the sky against the bringer of ruin, the terrible yokai Itsumade. I mean, obviously Loki's going to get some licks in during the final war, and really I do think the actual transformations lore is what kind of make me think that this could be a pretty epic matchup as well. Beyond the just already sick connection that they share as war gods, that's right, Loki fills the will of Elbaf, the warrior god of Elbaf who once wielded the Nidhogg fruit and the hammer Ragnir. But Mars, well, he's named after the Roman god of war, which adds just an extra fun connection here that I think, makes this fight kind of more interesting. But I do think that I low-key cooked on my other reason this matchup is super hot fire, because Loki's connection to Nidhogg makes him a near perfect thematic counter to Mars Itsumade, because both creatures actually share a very distinct connection to death itself. Little mythology to LDR here, the Nidhogg is a force that gnaws at the root of the world itself, the world tree, feeding on corpses and embodying decay as something inevitable, even necessary to the universe at large. Death in this sense is part of a cycle. It breaks things down so that something new can eventually grow from, the remains. And the Nidhogg kind of shows that death is a necessary, natural, good part of a healthy cycle, but that is not the case for the Itsumade. This big spooky bird serpent yokai by contrast here is tied to restless, unresolved death. It appears in times of plague and mass suffering, feeding on the fear and excess of lives that were never properly laid to rest. It doesn't represent a natural end at all. It represents death that lingers, repeats, and refuses to resolve. As you know, Loki's whole thematic stick is to devour the old world to make new for a new, better one. And who better to devour than an ancient Gorosei whose transformation embodies an endless, undying cycle of unresolved pain. It's a literal clash of death in the sky, and if you want to avoid a clash of death in the sky, join the Ohara Patreon. I've been creating some anti-Nidhogg technology recently that will keep you safe in these trying times, and you can get a hold of it right there. Like, seriously, I would actually love it for you to check out the Patreon. I put a lot of BTS and exclusive stuff there for fans of the channel, and that support then helps me make more cool videos like this. Just your continued support and viewership is already a blessing and a grace enough. And speaking of more, I've got more matchups to cover and enough plugging the Patreon, and this time I want to talk about a Holy Knight who has a grudge with a straw hat, a total flip on what I've been pitching up until now. Sanji versus Killingham. And this one just feels more personal in a very direct way, since Killingham literally told Sanji not to underestimate the Holy Knights, and that kind of feels like a bit of a hint, wink wink, right, towards another revenge match here. But this time it's Sanji in the hot seat, and the Kirin is about to give him the horns. Sanji's fights have always carried, as you probably know throughout the story, a very strong emotional core, but I genuinely do think that the dude just honestly deserves an all-out bloodbath with, a certified psycho here. In Elbaf, Sanji has gotten the jump on Killingham, and I wouldn't be too surprised if Sanji actually had a real struggle against the dude being at actual full power. And ironically, since Sanji still somehow doesn't have Conqueror's Haki, this could be a great moment for him to actually have a massive Haki bloom right then and there, especially because he literally mentioned that there is a way to kill him for good and that he can't do it. Now imagine the absolute insane sight of Sanji standing up against gigantic dream beasts. There's a lot of material there. They could embody his siblings, Judge even, and Sanji, small and human, is standing face to face with massive dream beasts and of course killing him. But amongst all that, he just lights his cigarette. God, does he make look smoking cool. And his Conqueror's will awakens and he goes absolutely nuts on them with his insane kicks. God, I absolutely love it. Now, there's a handful of matchups still left, including the opponent I chose for the captain of the Holy Knights, Figgle and Shamrock, but there's another Holy Knight we know about first, who we haven't seen return yet, who I really think needs an opponent. And there's one character, a leader of a country, a powerful ally of Luffy, and a warrior that I want to see back in the series that could be pretty perfect as a rival for them specifically. Carrot versus Saint Maffey. All right, hear me out. I will admit this matchup is probably my weakest, so I don't want to spend too much time on it, but let me just for a moment explain my thoughts here. Maybe you think it's fun, I think, so here we go, right? Okay, you probably think I'm absolutely nuts for even pitching this matchup. Why Carrot? Why Saint Maffey? Well, I do think there's actually a good reason for it, and it stems from who Carrot is and the potential that I think she unironically has in the story. Quick reminder, Carrot's a mink. She's the leader of the minks now, and she's using insanely cool lightning powers already, so she's perfectly set up to awaken Conqueror's Haki, and I do think she'd absolutely manage to pull it off for Luffy's sake. Yes, I said that Carrot might awaken Conqueror's Haki. I know it's clippable, but I said it, I'll stand by it. As for Saint Maffey, honestly, frankly, she's the odd outlier here I can't really pin down. I don't know if she's an Oni or a hybrid fishman. Why does she shoot lasers? What's up with the teeth and the horns? I got nothing, man. She's really weird, but what I do know is that she's honestly kind of ruthless. She's cutthroat, rowdy, and wicked, the total opposite of Carrot's kindness, optimism, and generally cheeky demeanor, and as a result, I do think that Maffey would be the perfect showcase of Carrot's growth throughout the series. Plus, come on, we could have beast on beast fighting and lightning versus laser breath. That's pretty much good enough for me. So now let's move past that and shift towards Shamrock, the man you've probably all been waiting for. Who's he gonna fight, Manu? Shanks probably, right? Right? Well, yeah, I think that's fairly likely, but I actually think there's an even better potential fight right there that maybe you didn't think about. Don't get me wrong, the brothers clashing, would be legendary, but I kind of think that Oda's been hinting at who Shamrock's actual opponent would be for decades, and if Oda actually does this, I will cry. And this is not a title of a video, I will actually cry. Because you know who is just as strong as Shanks? Someone who knows how to fight a figurant, and someone who already has shown time and time again that he respects Luffy, his dream, and Luffy's insane power to recruit just about any ally. Hello, foreshadowing, he even trained Luffy's right-hand man. That's right, Mihawk versus Shamrock. So, Mihawk versus Shamrock works almost too perfectly when you really frame it through their shared connection to Shanks, because Mihawk isn't just the world's strongest swordsman, he is our measuring stick for Shanks himself, right? Like, their rivalry defined an entire era to the point where Mihawk lost interest in dueling once Shanks lost his arm. But you know who has 2 arms, 2 thumbs, and is Shanks? Shamrock. I want this to happen. You want this to happen, you just didn't realize it yet. Mihawk versus Shamrock could give us the fight that we all wanted, but in a way that's actually so spiteful, funny, and badass. Seriously, I mean, just imagine Shanks stepping up to fight Shamrock, and out of nowhere, a hand is pressed against his chest, and snarky Mihawk comments that Shanks has a bigger battle to fight with Blackbeard. After all, only one man is capable of defeating Red Hair Shanks with 2 arms, and Mihawk can finally prove that by defeating Shamrock. This would actually settle the stupid Shanks and Mihawk debate once and for all. Oh, actually, wait, no, this would kind of fuel it. Mihawk stocks would kind of rise, and honestly, thematically, it still hits all the marks that Shanks versus Mihawk would hit as well. It's an ultra-powerful pirate defeating the pinnacle of the world government, not to mention that Shamrock is exactly what Mihawk despises as a marine hunter and as Shanks' rival. He's from Shanks' bloodline, but with a world government origin, he's just a perfect enemy for Hawkeyes. Now, obviously, there's yet another glaring point here, something I've discussed on the channel plenty of times before as well, and this matchup could fulfill my Mihawk was a former Holy Knight agenda pretty perfectly too. I'll very quickly catch you up to speed, but you probably know what I'm talking about. Mihawk's got all the big Holy Knight vibes with the crosses, Christian iconography, and just insane physical strength, but it goes even deeper. His surname, Dracule, literally translates to Son of the Dragon. He's got the same eyes as Emu, but with a slightly different color, yellow instead of red. And ever since we got the name of the Holy Knights, myself and many other people in the community too, by the way, assumed that somehow, someway, Mihawk just must be tied to this group. So, what if this is the actual point of the fight? It's former Holy Knight Mihawk, one of the strongest Holy Knights to ever exist maybe, a man who somehow managed to maybe like break the Covenant possession and was left with the Emu eyes as a remnant, or is Emu's direct descendant or something? And maybe Mihawk's class with Shamrock would be to help him break that possession so that the good guys can have Shamrock on their side? I don't know. Maybe so, but I don't think it's just as crazy as my next matchup, but I do promise I'm not huffing mad copium. I do think this actually makes sense. Chopper versus Wapol. Alright, so this one is honestly almost poetic in how grounded it is compared to everything else happening here. Like, it embodies everything I want for these fights, or at least my reasoning throughout this whole video, because it's funny, it's thematic, it's full circle arc, and it's got a good reason it should happen. For starters, we do know that Wapol, of all people randomly, has seen Emu. He's the perfect royal figure to bring in as a pawn for the big bad guy here. He's no longer just comic relief or a minor antagonist. He's someone who has seen the truth of the world, even if he doesn't fully understand it yet. It's terrifying, but also it's clear that Wapol should just side with them. I mean, if Emu needs a pawn, a king that can influence the various powers of the world, Wapol is kind of a perfect person to make an example of. Nobody is safe from Emu's corruption, not even the king of a recognized nation. And honestly, whether Wapol just chooses to become a Holy Knight because of course he'd accept insane power by Emu, a corrupt force, or Emu has to force Wapol to become a Holy Knight, the message it ends up sending to the world is still the same. You should obey Emu. And as for Chopper, I mean, he's not the same person anymore. He's grown into someone capable, confident, and strong in a way that his younger self could never have imagined. And he doesn't need Conqueror's Haki to defeat Emu's weird powers. He can just do it himself. I'm pretty sure that's because he's the forest god, right? Or a cure-all himself. But the point stands either way. He can do it. He can fight and cleanse the Domiverse with one punch, and I think he'd be able to fight and cleanse a Holy Knight as well. So now let's just give him the perfect matchup, the man that his entire story has been connected to, Wapol. And if you want to know what Chopper's true power might actually be and where his story is going and all the crazy stuff that Oda has been doing with Chopper suddenly out of nowhere kind of, and how it actually all comes together, you should check out this video right here where I really dig into the truth behind the forest god, Tony Chopper, and his weird mushroom devil fruit. Thanks for watching, thanks to all of our Patreons, and I will see you in the next video on Sunday. Ooh.